Cory Sandhagen, nice to see you. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
We're here at 50/50 BJJ in Falls Church, Virginia. How did you get hooked up with Ryan Hall, of all people?
I just messaged him on Instagram one day. It was about maybe 5 years ago now, but I was really interested in how to attack the legs. And then so I figured I'd reach out to the best guy in the world about it. I did, and then when I came here, I learned that there's so much more to be learned than just
Careful
attacking
what you
the
ask
legs.
for.
Yeah, so yeah, and then ever since, I've just been making periodic trips out here, and then Ryan will come out to Denver, and then I got hooked up with Ton too.
Ton Lee, yeah, from One Championship.
Yep, and then and yeah, so it's been like a good little group that we've been able to kind of
How long ago was that?
5 years ago, I think.
Okay, so it's been a long time.
Yeah,
then.
it's been a decent amount of time.
Yeah. How do you feel like it's gone? Pretty good.
Great. Honestly, man, like I feel really fortunate because I've bumped into really, really good thinkers and outside the box creative type of guys in martial arts. Like you could imagine, you just get a number of different types of personalities and characters in fighting, and I just feel really lucky that I've had people like my coach Christian, my coach Banks, Ryan now, who have been able to really just mentor me and teach me how to think better as a martial artist. And yeah, I'm just really lucky for that.
You're a bit of a thinking guy too, so I actually bought, I know you have several instructionals. I bought one of them. How many guys would you say, do you think, have put in the amount of time or just the amount of thought to it's more than systematizing what they do, but like thinking about concepts and how concepts drive action and everything else. Part of what I took away from, again, I haven't seen all of them, but the one I did take away, there was a significant amount of detailed thought, like John Danaher level of thinking. I don't know how many guys in the sport do that. Do you have a sense of that?
I don't think many do at all.
Right.
I didn't either. Like I'm not gonna take credit for me just stumbling upon this on my own. It was actually meeting Ryan that kind of got me to spark. One, because I wanted to be just as helpful to him as he was to me. And then just, I had never really received instruction in a manner that was so detailed and systematized before. And I thought that was like just really cool, and it really got my wheels spinning about what's my process in stand-up fighting, which is what I'm most good at. So it really got me thinking like, okay, well, what is my process towards doing this? Because Ryan was like, hey, so when you touch gloves, what's the first thing that you do? And I was like, I don't know, and then I was like, oh shit, okay, so I do this, I do this, I do this, and then I just followed that all the way down the rabbit hole and kind of just have been working through that kind of ever since I met Ryan a few years ago.
How comfortable are you with, not where the process has gone, and not that you ever finish learning, I'm not suggesting that,
sure.
But do you feel like you have how complete is your sense about your own game?
I think if I'm gonna be on the arrogant side of it, I think in 7 years I'll have it super, super figured out. That might be a little bit towards the tail end of my career, but that's being pretty realistic. But I think right now it's well thought out, but of course it can always get more and more thought out. I think in about 7 years I could have answers to almost everything.
What's the biggest revelation you had? Oh my God, how did I not know this? Or, oh my God, this changes everything. Okay, eureka moment.
Every time I come out here to 50/50 and learn some grappling stuff, I'm not.
I believe you.
I'm being super serious. Grappling and striking are very different. They happen at much quicker paces, or at least for the most part in striking. You also don't have a tactile feel in striking, like you do striking with your eyes more than you do it with your body and feel and proprioception and all of that stuff. So with striking, since it's done that way, it can be, I know, extremely challenging to try to, one, watch it and understand what's going on outside of, oh, that guy had a good technique. Oh, that guy knocked this guy out like that. Oh, this guy made this mistake, so he got knocked out like that. It goes beyond thinking in that way, and it goes into there is a process and an order to striking that can just be really hard to tie down because it happens at a very fast pace, and it happens all with your eyes, and that can be very just hard to target. So I'm giving a really long-winded spiel about why I think other people aren't able to do it too, is because it's really difficult to break down striking.
Do coaches sometimes not do it that way because maybe they could do not exactly what you do, but more of a system like that? But I was actually thinking about this too. If you've got a big gym and you've got 30 guys there, I'm not saying you couldn't teach smarter, but how detailed could you actually be? Is that fair or not?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I see it like this. I see striking like this. The conceptual understanding of it and the principles and all of that stuff, I think are there and they're true. I don't know all of them, I know some of them, but I think that they're true. I think that you can plug and play different techniques all you want, but I think people get really obsessed with like techniques and combinations, and they get away from like, okay, well, how do I defend myself? Okay, if I'm trying to block this out of my face, should I do it with my hand, or should I do it with my shoulder, or should I do it with a high elbow? And so I think that you can make it however you want to make it, as long as you fundamentally understand all of the principles inside that, and then you can have fun and be creative as you want inside of those principles. But in the bigger gyms, I suppose that you can, but to really give love to something and to really help another person out, I think it takes a lot of like individual interaction, and I don't know how much other guys are getting from that. You know, like I know with me at my team back home with Elevation, and even here, it's like, you know, we have a big team at Elevation, but there's maybe 6 of us that kind of interact, and like we'll do all this. My coach doesn't coach too many people, so I get a lot of like one-on-one attention, and also just because I've been going to the same place for 15 years, you know, like yeah. I'm much closer with them. So yeah, I don't know, it's tough. It feels like those bigger gyms, they lose a lot of character and personality as they get bigger.
Was there a fight where once you began to get a little bit better about understanding yourself and understanding the game, and it got implemented in the fight, and you were like, holy shit, this is what I've been looking for?
Yeah, kind of. I think that against Cheeto, I was pretty much able to like run my blueprint. Like I think that when you're fighting people, like if you do have like a good solid understanding of your own process, I think that you can run your process, have it be, you know, like good and better and just like overall more efficient, and then just like try to get them to start playing back with you. And if they don't play back with you, then you can only do so much. And that also just goes to show how efficient that like blueprint can be. Like when I fought Cheeto, even when I fought Font, although this was hurt, like I was able to run a super efficient blueprint that they couldn't do anything about. The fun piece for me starts happening when they start doing something back to that blueprint, and then I have to start being like, okay, well that's the door that I made you go through. Do I have answers for that door that you just went through? And to me, that's really good martial arts. And Ryan's helped me a lot understand that through grappling, and then I just kind of transitioned it into striking.
All right, so I got a bunch of questions I want to ask you about the fight game in general, and then I want to get to some of your fights in particular. Cool. Would you say that in the current state of think about the very best MMA strikers today, whoever that is in your mind, are there any common denominators to their game?
Yeah, I would say so. I think that, yes, I would say so. I think that, okay, so if I think of like O'Malley, who I think is a very, very good striker.
Let me stop you right there before you finish. What makes him good?
He's a master at controlling the space. I think space and time are the same because, like I said, striking gets done with your eyes. If someone throws a ball at you and you're 10 feet away versus 10 yards away, the likelihood that you'll dodge the ball from 10 feet away is not as high as if you can dodge the ball from 10 yards away. That's like on a macro scale. You make that onto a micro scale, and you know, I can only throw a right hand so fast. If I'm standing this close to you and throw a right hand, odds are that I could hit you with it. If I'm this far away, you know, my odds go down significantly. O'Malley has figured that out, which gives him really good ability to react in a way that is appropriate. If we're closer and there's less time that I can react to something, it's just much more chaotic because my brain can only fire those neurons so fast. O'Malley is a guy that controls the space really well, and he's a sniper. And that makes him super efficient. That's something that I figured out way early too, is it's like, oh, if I can stand 6 feet away from someone, not only is that good because I'm typically longer than the person and all of that, but it's good because I can make better calculated reads off of being that far away. And I think that that's like why longer guys do better. It's not just because I can jab you from the outside or, you know, I don't think it's about that. I think it's more about I'm giving myself more time to be able to make appropriate responses. And I think that that's a giant deal. Okay,
now getting back to it, the common denominators, if you think of Sean O'Malley, what are some of those common denominators?
I think that most people, I think, that are doing good stuff are doing reliable things. They're doing things that, I know that the internet's obsessed with watching guys get knocked out. Whenever I watch people on the internet get knocked out, the first thing that I'm doing is I'm watching the person that got knocked out and where the mistake was made on that person's end. I don't think that it's that cool. Like I do, obviously, like you hammer one home, you knock someone out. That's like awesome. I have always been in love with the self-defense piece of all striking, you know, like Pernell Whitaker was one of my favorite fighters. Nonito Donaire was one of my favorite boxers. And so I was just super obsessed with the defensive piece. And I think that the long run best strikers in the world, while it's not talked about that often, I think that the defensive guys that can protect themselves better than the rest of the guys are the guys that win. And then at some point you transition over to this place where you're no longer playing defense and offense separately. You're playing defense and offense at the same time. And I would say that that's a common denominator of what I see in the best strikers is that the offense never stops, but also the defense never stops either.
I'm going to ask a loaded question. So when I ask it, I'm asking an intentionally unfair question, hoping to get a fair answer.
Okay.
MMA fighters get hit a lot. Why do they get hit a lot?
I think that they're trying to learn from sports where there's already this agreement where we're going to hit each other a lot. I think that boxing coaches, kickboxing coaches, Muay Thai coaches are the ones that are typically in charge of overseeing that portion of a camp or that portion of a team or whatever it is. And I don't think that, I think that that's great for what it is and there's things to be taken from that, but MMA is a completely different monster than any of those other sports. Not only because the gloves are tinier, but also because just the overall rules of the game are different as far as we're not making an agreement, shaking hands and being like, hey, I'm gonna stand here, you stand over there, and we'll beat each other up. Like Dutch kickboxing, like I trained in Holland for a decent amount of time with Andy Sauer.
Oh, legend.
Yeah, legend. And I learned out there because I kind of had like a quirky style, like I was moving a lot. It wasn't as efficient as it is now, so it would be left, right a lot. And I learned really quickly, I was like, oh, people don't really know how to deal with that well. And if you don't make the agreement that we're gonna stand in front of each other and like play by these like masculine tough guy rules, it changes it completely.
Feinting and faking. You know, it's interesting, right? I feel like the city kickboxing guys, I'm sure you've been doing it for a long time, but as an observer, the city kickboxing guys really got my eyes open as to like how important it was and how like central to their games. And not that I'm saying they've been figured out, that's not what I'm saying, but I do feel like you're seeing it much more, like the advantage that they held has somewhat been reduced because it's just much more widespread. Do you agree with that assessment?
Along with city kickboxing or the feinting piece?
That you're seeing not just more feinting in the MMA fight game, but that you're seeing better feinting in the fight game.
Yes, I think feinting is really important. Like I said, so imagine me and you are playing a video game. And we're playing a game where things are flying. Say we're playing Dance Dance Revolution, okay? Say we're playing Dance Dance Revolution, and every once in a while, one of those little arrows trickles up or down, whatever it is. I'm not a big Dance Dance guy, but say that that's happening, and every once in a while, fake ones are getting thrown in. And your brain has to decide whether that's fake or that's real. That's gonna change the video game and make it way, way more complex. That's essentially what's happening when you're feinting a lot. I also think that in the sport of MMA, attacks come at all angles, you know, except for I guess down.
Even then, Superman punch kind of.
Yeah, even then kind of like, so because attacks can come from all angles and because the way that our brains are wired is we can only input so much feed before our process gets overwhelmed, it just makes feints way, way more important, in my opinion, for MMA than I think some of the other sports.
So it sounds like distance management, feinting, faking, these are critical ingredients to successful striking. What else would you add to that list?
I would add, so here's the problem I used to run into, is with the distance management thing, it can get really gamey, and if someone, it doesn't feel good sometimes either. Like, it doesn't feel good to always be on a bike and like keeping good range and then like just touching guys from the outside. While I'm not the type of guy that's gonna, like, it's always win first, put on like a cool knockout or whatever afterwards, I would argue that when you are being like the movie gamey type guy, it can just feel like not as like tough as you kind of want it to be, because there is a utility to ending a fight early. Like if I'm fighting someone and I'm like, hey man, we're evenly matched in a lot of areas, I don't know that I want to have that last 25 minutes. I'd rather just kind of like, all right, if I can get the guy out at 6-7 minutes, then I'd rather do that. That's not always the case, especially for me. I've been fighting in the top 5 for the last 3 or 4 years of my life, so it's very difficult to do. So I would say that distance management can get a little gamey, so you do have to have your crashes, what I call crashes, where I'm essentially shaking your hand and being like, all right, we'll go at each other at the same time. But I'm going to be able to do that in ways where I'm hiding what it is that you want to hit, whether it's my head, my body, whatever it is. So I would also add in that I think crashing with your opponents and knowing how to do that safely is like kind of fun from like a, you know, like the crazy, you know, part of my brain. And then also just it feels good to be like, hey, like you're not just going to bully me and punk me and like walk me around the cage. Like I'm going to hit you with something hard if that's what you choose to do.
All right, so explain to me how Francis Ngannou had success against Tyson Fury.
I didn't watch it.
You didn't see it?
No.
You didn't even see the highlights?
No, I didn't see anything.
No?
No, I haven't. Honestly, man, like the sport of MMA can get tricky for me, because while I do love the sport, what I love most is this. Like I love coming in and making cool stuff and learning cool stuff, and honestly, the more that I watch, I feel like the less creative I get and the more bad habits I sometimes pick up on. Not that, but also a lot of good habits too, and like just learning like where the direction of where fighting's going. But you also kind of get this weird pressure when you pay attention too much to, you know, what fans are saying or what, you know, maybe the company wants or something. You kind of get weird pressures that aren't real and will incentivize bad fighting. And I try to stay away from anything that's going to try to incentivize me from bad fighting. And I think that that's happening all over the internet and all over fighting in general. So for the most part, like...
Even in my world, I don't listen to my peers' podcasts.
Great.
Not because I think that they're bad, but because I don't want to... I found that, because this happened to me. Again, this is not the same consequences, but I found that I was accidentally aped their opinions without even thinking about it. And I was like, dude, I can't be doing that. I got to just have, right or wrong, I just have to have my own.
Yep.
So I wonder if there's just a natural ape watch ape kind of effect here a little bit.
There certainly is. Honestly, I used to be really on the neurotic side of fighting for a really long time. And that was one thing that I picked up a lot or that I was super neurotic about, is as I got closer to a fight, I wouldn't watch any fights. I wouldn't coach anyone. I wouldn't go to amateur shows. I wouldn't coach the amateur guys, because I didn't want the stupid stuff that they're doing entering my brain. Like, you know, and I was a bit neurotic about it. I can kind of dabble in it a little bit, but for the most part, especially when like the heavyweight game is just different than the little guy game. So I just steer clear of it, honestly.
What would you say are like, why is the heavyweight game so different from 135, for example?
I mean, 135 is way more dynamic. It's happening at such a faster pace. Also, like, having misconceptions about what shots can knock you out and which ones can't knock you out can be, like, if I only watched heavyweight fighters, I'd be like, oh, I can't get hit at all.
Oh, right.
You know,
right. Yeah.
And that might again play tricks on your brain and lead you to misconceptions that just flat out aren't true.
I will say this: you should see the fight.
Okay.
Because you know, it's funny. I interviewed Francis's coach, Dewey Cooper, who fought in kickboxing and boxing, many fights. And I asked him, you know, because one of the kind of conversations that trickled out afterwards was like, dude, Francis did pretty well. Like, I wonder if other MMA fighters could do well, because Sean O'Malley's been going back and forth with like Devin Haney and Tank Davis. And so I asked Dewey Cooper, I'm like, is that true? He was like, no, not at all. Dude, Francis is like a freak of nature.
Yeah, he is a freak of nature.
Because not only is he super powerful, but like in the fight you'll see, I think it was like round 7, so Fury had already been dropped in round 3. He came over the top with a punch, and it hit him with an elbow, and it looked pretty intentional. And it hit Ngannou right in the face as he was coming forward, and it didn't do anything to him.
Nice.
Nothing.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, I think Dewey's probably right. I don't think that there's a significant amount of crossover between high-level MMA fighters who could actually box with their counterparts at a similar weight class at all.
I certainly agree. I think, honestly, Francis is an absolute animal of like a specimen, you know? But outside that, I've had like short conversations and kind of just shook his hand and just kind of asked around, like, hey, like, what makes Francis so good, to people that are a little bit closer to him. Francis is a really sharp guy too.
Yeah, he's super smart.
He's not like he's no dummy.
Yeah, people think if you speak in broken English,
yeah,
oh, you're dumb. It's like, dude, that's his other language. That's not his primary language. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and there's a ton of that happening too. Like, I mean, even it sounds like I'm being obsessive about O'Malley, but you know, even O'Malley, like once you get past like the kind of Malibu's Most Wanted aesthetic that he kind of has to him, he's like a very smart guy, you know, And definitely one thing that I've learned from this sport is that there's a lot of different characters to play. There's a lot of personalities that you'll run into and all of this, but underneath there's like a level of intelligence to some people that is just different. And I don't even mean to call it intelligence in like a boastful way, like, oh, like that person was born smart. Like I think that people can develop being smart just like anything. Like I honestly feel like I was kind of a dumbass 5 years ago until I started bumping into Ryan and then figuring out my process to where I could actually have a conversation that was thought out and actually like reflected what it is that I'm actually doing. It's just a matter of, like, that's why I don't really like using the word intelligence. I like using the word thoughtfulness, is because I think that half of being smart is just being thoughtful and thinking about your actions and thinking about what it is that you're doing, whether that be life, fighting, whatever it is. And I think that Francis is really thoughtful. I think O'Malley's really thoughtful, and I think a lot of the guys at the very top are really, really thoughtful guys. So actually, to come back to your point about what is a common denominator among really good champions, I think that they're incredibly thoughtful.
Yeah, Izzy I would put on that level as well.
I would almost say almost anyone that's at, like Mayweather, certainly incredibly thoughtful.
I know.
And then like, you know, like the guys like throwing money, you know, like how you, yeah, exactly. That doesn't mean that those guys are dumb. You know, that's just like, they're just smart. And I think that I like using the word thoughtful, because when you use the word smart, people think that you're either born with it or you're not, and that's not the case. You can always choose to be more thoughtful, and I think that the common denominator is people being thoughtful.
I will say, though, that there's a certain kind of guy, and again, I don't know what the word is either, but I've seen it personally in the training room where, like, instructor shows the class something, and I can think of a guy who I remember the first time I saw this, I was like, oh, fuck. He actually fought in your division a long time ago. Was boys with Dominic Cruz. He's from this area, Mike Easton. And the coach showed Mike Easton something, and his ability to immediately reproduce it, like his body just naturally went there. And then when I asked him about it, I was like, how did you do that? He's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like his body just took him to places because he has a natural athletic aptitude, but that's separate from what it sounds like you're talking about, which is you might have the aptitude, you might not, but you've considered things in a much deeper way and how it connects with everything else, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I also think that there's two steps in learning anything. I think that there's being able to replicate a movement like this. Like I can do that too. I would argue that if you made it to the UFC, I would say 80% of the guys can probably, like I could show you something, you'd be able to replicate it in a second. I think the second part of learning is how to figure out how to make that thing work inside of a mechanism that is your own. And that's the second part of learning that I feel like I do really well. I think that a lot of other people probably do really well too, is they not only have an ability to like do the move that the coach was teaching, but also they have an ability to be like, I can put that into this part of my game, this part of my game, that part of my game. That will work well against the wall. It won't work well in space, like breaking down things like that too. But again, that's just a thoughtfulness thing. Let's
talk about the ground for you a little bit, because it's come certainly a very long way. One of the things that I noticed, if I may, is that before, at times, like you were happy to have offense everywhere, which I do think you have to have if you fight in the UFC, obviously. But it was like, if someone took you down, it's like, all right, I'll just fight you off my back now. And I think you've kind of gotten away from that. Talk to me about that journey and what were the realizations along the way where you don't want to not have submissions off your back, you don't want to not be able to get to turtle and stay there if you have to, but there is a different meta that's in play. Talk to me about some of your decisions that you had to figure out to get to that place.
The biggest thing in grappling for MMA is that most fights go to the judges' scorecards. And in that judges' scorecards, what they're judging is damage, all of this stuff, but they're also judging a certain aesthetic to what it is that you're doing. So a problem, like for example, when I lost to TJ, is it wasn't that TJ was controlling me, it wasn't that he was beating me up or anything, it was that the aesthetic of what he was doing to me it looked more like winning than, like he hung out on the body lock from behind a lot. I think maybe he like put me to a knee once and like got a takedown or whatever, but I would argue that a lot of grappling, because it's not like I hit you, you hit me, there's a lot of like interplay and like the judges just flat out not understanding who's in a dominant position and who's not once you get to a certain level of grappling. Like Ryan on bottom in 50-50.
Yeah, forget about it.
Forget about it. Whether you or the judges or whoever thinks that the top person is in control, that is certainly not the case. But the judges don't know that. The fans don't know that. A lot of people don't understand that piece. So approaching grappling from the standpoint of, okay, I need to be dominant and I need to be winning, but I also need to have an aesthetic to this thing that makes it look like I'm also being really dominant too. So for example, like when Song took me down, against Song especially, I was like, Song's not gonna take my back, I'll just like stand up whenever he takes me down. There's certain guys that I definitely can't do that against, but Song's one of them where I'm like, I'm gonna turn and get up. Why would I play on the ground doing a bunch of like stuff when it's like, I'll just stand up literally right now if I want to. So I think that just understanding who you're fighting, like what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and then just developing it in a way that is digestible for the people that are watching and also the judges who are scoring it, which is, the most important, and making sure that grappling is being done in a way that the judges can understand that I'm the boss here,
Was the TJ fight like the one where I'm sure it was a tough loss. By the way, I did score that fight for you. Mm-hmm. Admittedly, it was very close.
Yeah, it was close.
But was that the fight where you were like, man, fuck this, I can't fight this way anymore?
Kind of. That was the fight where I was like...
Because you shredded his knee in, the first or second round or something like that? Right?
Yeah. I wish I was training with Ryan a little bit longer. I think we had maybe been training together for a year and a half, and I just flat out wasn't good enough to fully understand. I can get into that if you want. But that was kind of the fight where it really made me pay attention to what the aesthetic of fights are. And I think in grappling, control, like if we're talking like me and you are fighting to the death, and we don't have knives or anything, and you're on a body lock behind me, I don't care. You literally can't hurt me if your hands are locked. And so that was kind of my thinking going into it, is I was like, oh, you can't hurt me, like who cares? These things get scored off damage. And that was a fight where I was like, oh, I need to think in a way where, the judges and people are gonna understand this a lot better.
You ever talk to an MMA judge?
No, I need to.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I have started doing that privately. They're all off the record, so I can't really repeat a lot of the stuff, but I would encourage that if you could.
Okay.
Yeah, you might find something interesting. I'm not saying in any way that you're wrong. I think I largely agree, but there's actually another problem that I have encountered as somebody who has to cover this sport all the time, which is not somewhat the case in the TJ fight, not totally, but that the opposite problem can happen where someone could be on top or let's just say some kind of dominant position, even the back. And I have found that they won't score, like, how in the unified rules, which is not true in one, but in the unified rules, defense is its own reward. They don't score it.
Okay.
So if you defend a takedown, the reward is you didn't get taken down, but they're not going to actively reward that. I have found that grappling has become that. Where if you think about it, or if someone, like if a very close fight, like you think about Valentina and Alexa Grasso on the ground, very, very, very close fight, Grasso, excuse me. If you just take someone down and even have the back, you might get it if the judge is like savvy about it. But if you don't put a little bit of sting on it, the reward for grappling will just be whatever you can get from it. They're not going to count it until you start mauling them a little bit. And that's not written in the rules, but it has just become the practice. And I don't like it, but it is the way of the world,
It almost seems like MMA is, I mean, because up until, like, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago, it felt like the Wild West. Like MMA just recently got very like pop culture-y cool, like comedians talk about it, YouTubers are
Mark
into it
Zuckerberg
now.
is training, get the fuck out.
Yeah. So my wife was laughing. She was like, hey, did you hear Zuckerberg tore his ACL? She was like, but don't worry, he'll be back. And I was like, oh, thank God.
I was super worried.
But yeah, so I think that MMA is in a bit of a transition period where everyone's like, no, the things need to be scored off damage. And then, but kind of like before, it was more like, it was control based. Like I don't need to do a ton of damage if I'm sitting on top, all of that. And I think that it's just in like this weird middle piece where one of them is going to win out, you know, like, and probably a little bit of both is what's actually going to happen. But it's very confusing being a fighter, you know, like that's one reason that I haven't talked to judges, although I definitely should, is I'm just like, I feel like it's going to be different in 6 months anyways, you know?
Interesting.
I don't know.
In terms of like, are there fights you, I want to talk about some of the wins in a minute, but the losses, are there any ones like, so I talk to some fighters and they're like, that was this, that was that. And then there are other losses where they're like, I want that one back. Mm-hmm. Are there any of those you want back? The Sterling one?
Yeah, I suppose I would want the Sterling one back, but I also got to be honest with myself. Like, I don't lose any sleep over any of this stuff. To be honest with you, like I don't have the personality, and I'm not really like a promo guy, anyways. Where it's like, you know, like, yeah, give me, because I've been wanting revenge, blah blah blah. You know, like I'm not that guy. I'll fight whoever gets me closer to the title, or I'll fight for the title next, and that's really as far as I kind of think. Since I've been off of my phone a lot, and like I can kind of come back to being myself a lot, and really what I really enjoy is just getting better every single day. And I think that a lot of other things can sometimes get in the way of that, like thinking about who I want to fight next, all of this. And I know it's an important piece. I know. I just cannot get myself to care enough about who it is that I'm going to fight next. Like, I just want to train every day. I want to get better, and I want to fight good guys that are going to push me closer to being a world champ. You
don't think of it as like, so for example, Sterling and O'Malley, they just fought, but if you had to fight them in consecutive fights, they're completely different, right? I mean, they can do a lot of the same things, but they're very different fighters. Is there no part of you that's like, I look forward to solving these riddles, so to speak?
Yes, I do like doing that.
Okay.
I definitely like doing that. I definitely like fighting people that are good, and not just like really simple, you know, like that. Like 12 weeks of planning for simple, like I lose steam. 12 weeks, like for example, when I was getting ready for Umar, was super fun. Like it was really fun to try to figure out how to dismantle that style. All of like the, you know, the different avenues that it could go in, and then having, you know, like answers to each avenue. That was really interesting to me. But from like a revenge standpoint, like fighting TJ again, fighting Sterling again, Jan again, if it happens, then it will happen. But I don't lose any sleep over any of that.
Okay, why don't you give me a health update? So you had surgery on this arm.
Yep.
Oof, look at that.
Yeah.
How many stitches was that?
It was staples.
Staples?
Oh, no, it was stitches. Yeah, I don't know, honestly, but it was a lot. It's going pretty good. I actually had 2 elbow surgeries, so.
Same arm?
Same arm.
Wow.
So here was the big deal, and this is why I was like just a little bit more hurt than normal after, you know, like getting some criticism after the last one, is because I was dealing with a ton of bursitis in this elbow because I have just a ton of loose bones that were floating around in there. And that was just earlier in this year starting to cause me a bunch of bursitis, all those loose bones. The bursitis got infected about a month before the fight. So I was on antibiotics for 10 days.
That'll fuck you up.
Yeah, and then I got off of them, and it came back immediately. So then I had to jump on more antibiotics. So I was on antibiotics for, I think, 2.5 weeks. Actually, maybe a little bit longer.
So I just spoke to Gordon Ryan. He had antibiotics that he had to get through for any number of issues. He made the point that it obviously makes all of your connective tissue much weaker.
I didn't know that.
So does that explain?
That's what happened, yeah.
Fucking hell.
So it got infected. I was on a ton of antibiotics. I got off of them literally a week before the fight. So I like jumped through all of these loopholes. We were actually, like, my coaches were like, you sure you want to fight? And I was like, yeah, man, they told me it's #1 contender. Like, I got to fight, you know? And then so that made the joint really weak. I didn't really realize that. Went into the fight, the first grappling exchange. I didn't feel anything. When we stood up, I threw some punches, and I was like, shit, you know, like, that's not good. I threw a couple more punches, and I was like, I can't really use, like, it's round 1. Like, don't make a partial tear, a full tear, or whatever it is that's going on in there. So I kind of made the decision round 1. I was like, just don't use it anymore. So it kind of sucked because I was like, man, like I jumped through all these loopholes to try to perform, and then it ended up screwing up the performance anyway. So that was kind of a bummer. But yeah, so I had a tricep replacement, And then 8 weeks after that, I got the scope. That was kind of the initial like piece that more or less caused it. So I got both of those done, and yeah, it feels great, honestly. Like, it gets really sore. I'm not even 3 months post-op, and I'm like training pretty good. So that's really nice, because I was starting to go down like a weird, creepy hole.
Like
being
what?
hurt, just like being weird, dude. Just like waking up and being like, am I myself? You know, like it wasn't like a depression. Like I hear guys when they're hurt, like they get depressed or whatever, but I would kind of wake up and it was like the same day over and over and over again, which was just not fun. And then, but I remember just audibly being like, what the fuck is wrong with me right now? And I couldn't really put my finger on it as much as I was.
When you say what's wrong with you, I mean, obviously your arm is healing, but you mean something else?
No, it felt like someone else was just like my life was so removed from what it normally is that I like almost feel like someone else was up there living in my brain.
So if I may, it sounds, it doesn't sound too dissimilar from what, did you hear what Volkanovski just said?
Yeah.
Where he took that fight against Islam, I would say inadvisably, but he probably got a good amount of money for it, because he just couldn't stand the idleness of it all. Do you understand that?
Yeah, I understand. So I think that a piece of that is the world that we live in right now, is it's like boom, next thing, next thing, next thing. So we start to adopt that, like next thing, next. I want to watch the new show. I want to watch the new instructional. I want the next fight. I want the next big knockout. I think that that's just a piece of the world that we live in, because we're so addicted to things moving so quickly now that we're attached to like the newspaper almost, which is what our phones are. And so I understand completely the feeling of not moving forward. Like this made me feel like I wasn't moving forward anywhere. And I don't know if that's normal for all people, but I definitely can relate as an athlete to the feeling of like, hey, I'm supposed to be getting better every day. And now that I can't get better, or I'm supposed to be moving closer to like some greater grand legacy thing, or I'm supposed to be, like making a paycheck or whatever, and then when you can't do that, or you're not doing that, it just feels strange and weird. And like for me, it manifested in a way where it's like, you're not you anymore. So I can relate. It's kind of weird.
I will also say too, like the internet, and I don't want to blame the internet, but maybe they're a function of our times.
There's a lot of things that we could blame on the internet.
Well, I do mean this, like, do you not, it's somewhat gone down a little bit, I think, I'm not really sure, but the permeation of like hustle culture bullshit into everything.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it's like, you gotta wake up at 4 a.m. and you gotta read your testimonials, and then at 5 you're doing a cold water plunge. It's like, actually, why can't I just get a good night's sleep?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't even understand that, and I just feel like there's this enormous pressure to even if you're just an ordinary guy, forget about being a professional fighter, to just maximize every second of every day towards this goal at all times. And I'm like, I don't think we're supposed to be doing that.
No, I think people are really sad, man. I think that they're sad and they don't really realize it. And I think that they're like, I think that people don't have the same, we're not as, like we're globalized now, but we're not really a community. And I think that you lose a lot of your purpose when you're not a part of a community. And I can only, like, I've literally been in gyms my entire adult life. And then before that, it was just sports gyms, like basketball and all kinds of stuff. So I don't really know how the other half lives or whatever, but I do think that there's a really big portion of people lacking community. And then in a lack of community, they have a lack of purpose. And then they start to feel like something's wrong with them. And then in the feeling something wrong with them, they're like, oh, maybe I should listen to this guy that clearly has a purpose, because this person that has a purpose that wakes up in the morning, he's got to be doing a ton of stuff. So let me just try to like piggyback that, do all of these other weird things that make me feel like I'm like taking care of myself, when it's really just like, hey man, like you're not going to change the world. Like that's like another important thing that I kind of have to remember. Sorry, I'm going on a bit of a rant here.
I can't have these conversations with everyone in the fight game.
Okay.
So by all means, please continue.
Okay. I think that people are just big time lacking purpose. So one thing that I have to remember is that the world doesn't revolve around me. I could have 10 million followers on Instagram, whatever, be the most popular guy in the world. I don't think that I'm going to change the world long term. I think that that's everyone's job as an individual. And I would almost say in 100 years, I can change the world just as much as, the average Joe down the street. And I think that people start to believe that they're the ones that can change the world, because again, we're sold this idea of, hey, be better, do more, be more successful, have more of a purpose. And people start to revolve around their own, this is, oh yeah, like me, like I need to project all of this goodness out of me, like be a good person, do all of that. And all of that is true, but at the same time, what's also true is that I can just do my best every day and take a lot of that pressure off of me and just, love the people that are close to me and care about them, take care of them, make sure that like Ton's getting ready for his fights, Ryan's getting ready for his fights, and I don't need to change the world and like be righteous and force things down people's throats that are my own personal beliefs that might change in 5 years. And so I think that I think that people are just big time lacking purpose because they've been sold on this idea that it has to be this grand purpose. When really your grand purpose could just be like, hey man, like for me, it's like love my wife. When I start a family, take care of my family, make sure all my friends are happy with the way that I'm being, and help, like the people that I can help. And that feels good enough for me.
Yeah. I got to say, I can't stand it when I see like late 20s, early 30s people who are like, so I'm 44 now, which is just hard to even fathom, but it is true. You will get there as well. But you see them like, they're very, very, it's not even just hustle culture, but they're very, very adamant that their individual actions day to day, they can force the world to bend to their will. And I'm like, dude, you can only think that if life hasn't slapped the shit out of you yet,
Yeah.
which it will. You know what I mean? Like this constant belief that today is the day I'm going to mold the world to my will. And it's like, I don't want to talk people out of being proactive, about having goals, about working hard. Working hard is one of the best things you can do. But I just find it like you still believe your own bullshit when you're doing something like that, right? Like it's crazy.
Well, I have another rant too on how
Let's hear it.
The internet, okay, so I think that before social media started, it was people that were probably 30 to 50 that were the generators of culture and the generators of like good thing, because they were the ones doing journalism, they were the ones writing newspapers, they understood, they just flat out, the world was set up in a way where you had to work your way up to a point, and that took years to do, and once you work your way up to this point, then you have the knowledge and the wisdom and all of that stuff to be like an influencer of, maybe 30 years ago where I was a journalist or I was a really good newspaper writer or I was a politician, whatever it is. I think that now, because of social media, it's 16 to 25-year-olds that are doing this all day. We kind of do a little bit, like I'm 31, like I kind of do a little bit, but not really. Like I stop myself because I know how like that can really start to mess with me. So anyways, I think that it's the 16 to 25-year-olds that are almost running culture because they're the ones that are on their phones liking and seeing everything. Mm-hmm. And then everyone's trying to tailor things towards that one group of people to try to influence them. And it's like, it turns into this almost like high school feeling place where it's like, yeah, but none of us in this arena have enough wisdom because we just flat out haven't lived long enough. And I think that it's sad because I think in our society too, we've lost a decent amount of like listening to our elders and understanding that. Like my dad, I used to think like my dad doesn't know shit, like he doesn't.
That's a very teenage thing though. Yeah.
He doesn't give me any advice, but I'm like, oh, my dad doesn't give me advice because he's smart enough to not argue with a dumb fucking kid, That's why he doesn't give me advice. Right. And I've just, as I've gotten a little bit older, and I still have a lot to learn too, but I'm just like, man, there's so much wisdom in what older people are saying. And I don't think that a lot of young people, including myself when I was that age, believe that. The problem now, though, is that their voices are really loud.
Yeah, they're super amplified.
They're super loud.
I will say, though, that as you get older, you'll see that the constant, like the zeitgeist of the world, it is defined by the youth. It is.
Yeah, okay.
You know what I mean? Like you really feel that. I didn't feel it at 31 either. 38, I started to feel it.
Yeah,
like,
okay.
Ooh, I'm getting the opinions are shifting away from my from my age group, and now I'm like I don't give a fuck anymore. I'm too old to care. But all right, let me get back to you a little bit here.
Okay.
Give me an honest opinion of the MMA media, present company included or excluded. It depends on what you want to say.
I think that they're pretty good. I think you do a great job, like I was telling you before. I think that you're earnest, you're really honest about your opinion, and I think that that's like number one, like golden flag, that's really awesome. I think that when I think of other people, I get along with Ariel really good. I think that Ariel's fine. MMA junkie guys I really like.
Wow, you're the first fighter I think I've ever heard say
Oh, really?
the LT, Ariel Helwani, MMA junkie trifecta hit. Yeah. Would you say most of your peers don't?
I don't really know, honestly. I feel like I live, like I try to just live and let be. So I don't have a lot of opinions about things.
I see.
I don't have a lot of, it's not that I don't care as much as I'm just like, oh yeah, like that's what they do, and for all the good and the bad. Like so I run into this problem a lot in MMA, where it's entertainment and it's sport and it's like this beautiful martial arts thing. And like sometimes I'll get mad, I won't say who, but I'll get mad at some of the people that are being the voice for MMA and they're trying to push this like really entertainment narrative. And that sometimes will bother me because I'm like, but it's so artistic and it's so beautiful too. Like, like don't put, like the entertainment piece is important, but that can't be everything. But then in my head, I'll stop myself and be like, look, man, that's just the way that you view the sport. Like, just like how I need to be an artist, that's kind of a boastful word to use for what I'm doing. But as much as it is my job to be an artist, it's like a company's job to be entertaining. And we kind of like bounce off of each other because my job is to make it beautiful, your job is to sell it. And I can't get mad at you for trying to sell something, just like how you can't get mad at me for trying to make something beautiful. So I think that the only time that I really start to, get annoyed with the MMA community is just simply when it becomes way too much about entertainment and not about like the baddest fucking guys in the world going at it and appreciating like the strategy and all the encompassing lot that goes into making an awesome fight. Like when all of those things get ignored and it's just like entertainment, fucking like dopamine hit on your phone, like, like
power slap.
Yeah. That's when I start to get annoyed, but I don't know. I guess I don't really have
I got to tell you, your opinion is very much unlike your peers.
Oh, okay.
Very much
What, they don't like them?
I think that they have their favorites like anybody else would, but I think in general, also the MMA media is really, it's changed a lot.
Oh, has it?
No, for the worse, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And the jobs are much less secure, there's less of them, the pressures are much harder, like it's not a great time in general, but neither here nor there. Let me ask this. So I cannot imagine as a 31-year-old man that you don't care about making a lot of money, but I guess I don't know or understand, like, so for example, because I work with Showtime, I've got to interview and then cover the career of Tank Davis. Tank Davis is extremely talented, but he is very explicitly about getting paid, explicitly. And he is handsomely rewarded, as he should be. I don't know if I get the same sense from you. To what extent does prize fighting matter in your life?
Okay, so that's been a tricky one because I kind of have, maybe like attacked my peers for it being more about entertainment and like you just want the money fight, blah blah blah. Like as I'm getting older and as I'm starting to understand like, I'm I got 5-6 years, maybe 7 tops, I think I'm gonna have a family. I want my family to be secure. The main reason I started fighting is because I was like, okay, I just want to be able to train every day and I want to not have to stress about money. Those were like the two things, because as you know, when you're coming up through the martial arts, like ranking, like you're not making shit for money until you get into the UFC. So my whole goal for a really long time was like, man, I just got to make enough money to live so that I can train and not have to work all the time. And so that was one of my big goals. Now that I'm getting older and understanding it a bit, I understand the motivation of wanting to be financially secure. The problem becomes when that starts being the thing that's running the spirit and the mind of like this person. I think that that's where you run into an issue. I think that there's nothing wrong with being motivated by all kinds of crazy stuff. I think that that's all okay, but I think that deep down you have to have some level of like, all right, at this point I'm getting a little greedy, And I think that if the world keeps stepping closer and closer to, and I have no problem with capitalism, but if the world keeps stepping closer and closer to success is just making a ton of money and doing all of that, I think that what you sacrifice is a lot of character and a lot of virtues. And I don't want to see the world become that, and I don't want to become that either. At the same time, fuck yeah, I want to make a ton of money. Like I want to, in the next 5-6 years, I want to make a ton of money. But at the same time, I'm definitely not willing to sacrifice me developing as a person and me, you know, having more wisdom or whatever in order to make a few more millions, you know?
Do you feel like you might have a harder time at this stage? Not that they're not giving you good fights against tough guys, highly ranked they are, but like, you know, part of the reason O'Malley is where he is he is very good. Clearly, I want to make sure I say that first.
Yep.
But he is, as a personality, outrageous. He is outrageous. Outrageous sells, right? Do you feel like you might not get the same opportunities because you are not outrageous?
Yeah, and that's okay with me.
Okay.
I had to deep dive that in my imagination and be like, okay, cool, Cory, like you're virtuous, like, you know, what are the consequences of that? And it's like, well, they're pretty significant if you really think about it.
Yeah,
you know?
that's why, what was it, Aristotle? Virtue is its own reward.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. And, you know, it's just one of those things where, you know, like ideally I want to find some balance between the two, you know, like I want to be the Buddha, but I also want to be Michael Jordan in life, you know, like those two things, they you know, they're like opposite sides of a magnet, you know, like they don't really click together. So it's really, that piece can be really difficult. So I guess I'm just going to keep taking it one day at a time. You know, I do think that I have some worth, but the worth that I have comes from me just trying to make this thing beautiful and give it a lot of thoughtfulness and make it as efficient as possible and like be on the cutting edge of everything that is martial arts. And if I have to sacrifice a lot to do that, I think in 10 years I'll be able to take that one on the chin.
Give me a sense of what you feel like your division's going to look like maybe by this time next year. Who's champion? Where's Umar? Where are you? Where's everybody?
Good question. I was actually super excited for Song and Jan to fight. I'm really bummed that fight isn't happening.
I know.
I really, really wanted to see that fight. I guess it's kind of interesting.
Because your division is fucking tough.
Yeah, I think
tough guys.
Yeah, I think it's partially going to stay like that. I think everything's comparatively, like right now we just compared to the other divisions have a lot more new faces. We have a lot more big fights that still need to happen. So I think comparatively to the other divisions, it's certainly one of the more exciting ones. I would also say too though that it could change in a split second where, you know, maybe 170 becomes like this crazy or 185 because Strickland's champ becomes crazy popular. So I think that all of the divisions are pretty, you know, fairly competitive. I think that they're just more down the chain. So they're a lot like Volk's cleared the 45 division, you know.
Not quite yet.
Not quite yet. Yeah, that's true. That's a really tough fight for him too. So I think that it'll work itself out some, and then I think that hopefully it will be me will be champ and stay champ for a decent amount of time, fight through the division, and then make this division as boring as possible. That's really my ultimate goal, is to just, you know, like, fight it out, beat everyone, and make it as horribly boring as possible, because every time I fight, they know that I'm going to win.
Yeah. You know, I was thinking about TJ Dillashaw the other day, too, because he got bitter at me. Do you remember his fight against Sterling, where his shoulder popped out within like 6 seconds or whatever, some absurd amount? And I had said, you know, people are paying money to this to watch, and like people are gambling on this, and I care less about the gambling, but you know, people are paying for pay-per-view. If you're physically like that compromised, he got bitter because I had called it borderline fraud. It's not fraud, but like if you're that negligent, I still maintain he should not have fought. But at the same time, I do understand being 37 and being like, it's a title shot and I've got a limited window to make money. I wonder how you view, not your exit, but late stage fighting, like the Tony Ferguson time. When you see fighters doing that, on one level it's a cautionary tale, on the other one it's like, dude, like they're there for a reason. Like everyone thinks it's not going to be them, and then it ends up being them, you know? I wonder when you see that, what you make of that.
No, I'm setting everything up in my life right now is to be set in 5 years. And I think that, again, not a lot of people, I think, do things like that. I imagine a scenario where I have all the same bills that I have, and then UFC fighting's done. That would be a really giant, big deal to be like, oh, now I got to scramble for some type of career. And, you know, if you want to start a gym or if you want to do anything, and everything takes time to build. So really right now at this point, I'm setting myself up for 5 years down the chain so that I don't have to be one of those guys that's fighting all the time in order to make money, because it is a thing, you know, and I think that people really downplay the level of motivation that is. It's like, hey man, like where else in life, ever in your life, can you make $500,000, you know, in a night. And whether you care that you do well or not is not important. It's like, oh, I can do that and make that amount in a night. That'd be really hard to say no to, especially if you didn't have a bunch of other things already set up to where it's like, you know what, like my bills are paid because I set up myself in all of these other areas too. That's, I think, the way to do it. I think that a lot of that, unfortunately, gets motivated because where else can you make that kind of money in a night? And if someone's going to give it to you and you're kind of towards the tail end of your career, I would argue that you probably don't really care that much if you're going to win or lose.
Right. And that was a title fight. That's a little bit different, but I understand the general motivation. Okay, so as we wrap here, you know, it's kind of interesting. You said that obviously if you don't get a chance to fight Sterling again, you probably would, you know, you like your chances. But what was interesting, I was thinking about this, was like, not one of these things where like everything I am not one of these guys who believes everything happens for a reason. I think that is complete bullshit. However, certain things can work out advantageously in ways that you sometimes don't anticipate. So for example, if you had beaten Sterling, right, do you think you would have gone on to become champion, or is now a much better time for you to actually campaign for that title?
Yeah, I think now is a much better time. You know, if you ask me in 2 years, though, I'll say the same thing in 2 years. Yeah, I think that I can get incredibly good incredibly fast. Like, if I have a superpower, that's what my superpower is. You know, I just learn things very quickly, and I understand things very quickly. And I think that the more time you give to me, always the better I'll be, until again, like my body starts decaying and my chin starts decaying and I can't take a shot as good, or I'm just flat out don't have the same reaction time and speed or whatever. So yes, I would say that it could have gone my way and maybe I could have done good and been champ and fought TJ for a belt instead, or fought Jan for a belt instead. But then, you know, I lost to Jan too. So maybe it wasn't the right time for me, you know, and I don't think or get the notion that the universe loves me and cares about my dreams any more than the next guy. So no matter if I'm living good, living bad, I don't think it really, like I said, I don't think that we're as significant as our egos sometimes make us feel. But I do know that me compared to when I fought Sterling now is a completely different animal in the way that I understand all facets of the sports. My striking, my grappling, my wrestling, flat out everything is, you know, exponentially greater. And I think that that would have been the case either way. And that's kind of the only way that I can really view that.
One more question before we go. I'm doing this now with more MMA fighters. You're not the first one I've asked this, but I haven't asked it to many. Do you worry about head trauma? And if so, how do you feel about it? Yeah,
I get a little nervous about it. Like, I always kind of have this thing in my head where it's like, if I get knocked out twice bad, I don't know if I'm going to keep doing it, you know? Maybe I don't think about it too much because that will create a giant pressure on me, but yes, I do worry about it. I think that because I'm at the level that I am, I've kind of worked through a lot of that. Like, you don't know how good of a shot you could take until you actually take the shot. I've worked through a lot of that stuff, so I don't feel the need to do the same style of training that I've done in the past, almost like a Max Holloway, where Max Holloway is in sparring. The reason Max Holloway is in sparring is because he's so elite that he can see and understand what's going to work, what's not going to work, what's a threat and what's not a threat in the training room, where none of those things are actually real. He doesn't need to put himself in threatening situations to discover if it's a real threat or not a real threat. I would argue that I'm at that level. I think that there is no getting to that point without figuring it out, unfortunately. But yes, anytime I get hit or anything, I try to handle it as best as I can, but I will stay away from sparring for at least 2 weeks. I will not let my head get rattled more than one time in a 2-week period. Yeah. And I don't love it all the time, but that's, you know, like, you absolutely need to take care of yourself. Me personally, if I started to feel myself get different, you know, in like my ability to remember or whatever it is, I would likely call it quits and just be like, hey man, I got as much juice out of this thing as I could, and now I got to walk away from it.
Yeah, I always think about it too, because like I came up in the era when like Vanderlei Silva was competing. Just the amount of times he got knocked out in a fight, just remember that. Then you add in all those shoot the box training time. I worry profoundly about that generation of fighters where they had no concussion awareness, no knockout awareness, nothing. Nothing.
You'd be surprised too as to how I think apparent it still is. Like even when I watch some of the guys, I'm like, don't spar. Like, what are you guys doing? You know, like I think that it doesn't need to be that way. Certainly doesn't need to be that way once you're, you know, above learning all of those lessons that hard sparring teaches you. I don't really think that it's super apparent. I guess if I had any advice to offer people, it would be, you know, like do those rounds, but if those rounds do rock you or rattle you at all, like you have to take 2 weeks off. I actually, when I watch fighters, like either on Instagram or whatever, and I know that they come from a rough gym where I know that they're beating the shit out of each other, I love it because I'm like, odds that guy walks in with some type of head injury already, great. You know, and I really attribute, like, I think that it compounds itself, but it compounds itself inside of a time frame where if I get rocked, like, I know that guys spar harder closer to their fight sometimes and they taper a little bit, but I stopped sparring hard like 3 weeks before because I know that in the 3-week period, I will, if I take a tough shot 2 weeks before the fight, I know that that's going to be lingering. You know, like it's within that window, and none of this is scientific, but it's just feel and understanding. But that's when I call it quits because I'm like, I'm not even going to risk taking a hard shot so I could walk into the fight, get hit with nothing, and then have it hurt
crumble,
me.
Yeah.
So I feel like, that definitely needs to be thought about. If it's not thought about, then you're doing something certainly wrong. But you know, I don't know that I've given it enough thought to be able to offer too much methodology behind how to stop that outside of there is a time frame when these things seriously can compound. So just don't let them compound within that time frame and then go beat the shit out of each other, you know, get hit in the head and then have to take another 2 weeks off sparring.
We'll end on this question.
Okay.
Are you still the #1 contender? Do you anticipate fighting Sean O'Malley next, and if so, when?
I hope so. This is healing way quicker than I thought, so I think that I'll be ready like end of Q1. I know that Cheeto and O'Malley I think are supposed to fight maybe, hopefully early in the year, and then, you know, whenever the winner decides that they want to fight again, I hope that I can slide into that spot. I think that I have a really good argument for fighting each of them, you know, like if Cheeto wins, that might even make me champ, you know. No, I'm just kidding. But if Cheeto wins, like Cheeto's outright, like I saw him in a hotel lobby, he's like, hey man, I have to fight you again. And I was like, cool, like, yeah, win against O'Malley, and then, you know, like, we'll definitely fight. So I know that he wants that fight again. He's clearly not happy with the way that the first one
He's
went.
a tough bastard, Cheeto.
Yeah, he is, yeah.
He got a tattoo on his scalp, man. Like, that's a commitment.
Yeah. Cheeto's another one of those guys that is smarter than he looks, too. And then, again, like, against O'Malley, I think that I have plenty of good, you know, reason to fight him, and it wouldn't be a tough sell for I think a guy like me and O'Malley to fight. Like that'd be one of the most exciting fights at 135, and so I don't think it's a tough sell. I think that the UFC knows that, and I think that, you know, obviously the other guy is Merab. Merab totally should be considered in that conversation. Why he's not, I'm not sure.
Merab Henry, who wins?
I think Henry will probably win, honestly.
Ooh, okay, yeah. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I think Henry's really good.
He is very good.
He's really, really good. So I got Henry winning that one, but maybe Merab will win. Merab's a machine too, so I am hoping, you know.
Well, I appreciate this conversation, and I don't know when you'll be back, but I hope it's sooner rather than later, and it would be great to see you with the belt around your waist, but either way, it seems like you got a head on your shoulders, so congrats on everything, and thank you for the time.
Cool, thanks, Luke.
There he is. Cory Sandhagen, folks, right there.